going to talk about 3 diet questions that you are likely asking all wrong. So we're going to go over number 1 is, how fast can I get the weight off? So that is a big question that a lot of us ask when we're trying out new diet plans, or when you learn about like the eat more to weigh less philosophy. People want to know, how fast can I get the weight off? The proper question would be, how long can you keep the weight off? So if the method that you're choosing, just because it's fast, is not going to help you keep the weight off long term, then it's probably not something that you want to mess around with anyway. So that's something that you should really be asking yourself when you're trying to figure out how quick you can get the weight off. Because if you can get it off in, 2 weeks, and then you regain it all in like 2 weeks, then it wasn't really worth it, because you need to be focusing on sustainability and something that you can maintain long term. So if you can't maintain the diet, then that's the bigger question. So instead of, actually saying like, well, can I get it off really fast? Is this going to work? How fast is this going to work? Because most of us have been down that trail, one too many times. We've lost the weight, more times than we can count. But the fact is, it keeps finding us. It keeps coming back. So you need to focus on not just getting it off, but on keeping it off. And if you can't keep it off, then it is not the diet for you. Okay, so the next question. So question number 1 was, you're asking how fast you can get the weight off, but you should be asking, how long can you keep it off? Choose the one that helps you to keep it off. The next question would be, what do I need to remove? A lot of us, when we go into diets, that's the first thing we want to know is like, okay, so what do I need to cut out of my diet? Or what do I need to stop doing? And we automatically look for like the negative. Try reframing that in a more positive light and asking yourself, what do you need to add? Do you want to, do you need to remove carbs, or do you just need to add protein? Do you need to remove meat, or do you just need to eat more vegetables? Things like that. So we want to look automatically for the thing that we need to get rid of for some reason, because we've, all the years of dieting, especially those who have done it over and over again, we start looking at it as like it has to be this like punishment thing. So we want to know like, okay, what do I need to stop doing? What's the negative here? There doesn't have to be one. If you feel like you do have bad habits, then you can try adding in good habits until they slowly crowd those out. So it doesn't always have to be about removal or, starvation and things like that. So instead of slashing your calories, maybe just start with adding in more exercise. Instead of, taking all carbs out, try adding in more protein, add in more vegetables, drink more water, eat a little bit more fiber, try lifting weights. So if you're thinking like, okay, I need to add in, 2 more hours of cardio or something like that, try lifting weights, because weights is going to help increase your metabolism anyway. So a lot of times it's not necessarily the things that you need to take out of your diet or your lifestyle that are causing the problem. It's the things that you need to add. So if you can add more of the good stuff, if you can add more of the things that will help you to curb some of the things that maybe you really do want to stop doing, you don't really like doing, then those are the things that will help you more, especially because you're doing those things because they're habitual. So you would need to create new habits before you can just remove something else. So create the habits of the good things that you want to add before you start trying to remove anything. And what you'll find out is that as you actually start adding them, they will crowd out the other ones, so that you're slowly just replacing the habits. And that's the key, because the reason why you are who you are is because of your habits. So if you're not developing new habits, which goes back to the first one, because maybe you're losing the weight too fast, then you're going to keep running into that problem. That's the reason why it's always going to be harder for you to keep the weight off long term, because you're not building the habits that's going to sustain the weight loss. So for those of you guys who are just joining, we're talking about 3 questions that you're asking all wrong when it comes to dieting. Number 1 was, how fast can I get the weight off? When in reality, you should be asking, how long will you be able to keep it off after you lose it? Number 2 was asking, what do I need to remove? When you should essentially be asking, what can I add? What can I, add to this journey in order to help make it more, successful, or to help crowd out some of these bad habits? So The third one that you're asking all wrong is you're saying, why won't the scale move? You're asking some type of scale related question like, okay, I need the scale to go down. Why won't the scale move? Instead, you should be asking, how do I maximize fat loss? Focusing on the scale means you're focusing on weight loss, and weight means you could be losing anything. You could cut your hair and lose weight. So you're not just focusing on the scale moving, because that means that anything could be, you could be losing muscle mass, you could be losing bone mass, you could be losing internal organ mass, which likely you are if you're on diets that are only focused on scale weight, and especially if they're focusing on getting the scale to move fast, which goes back to number one. So if you're choosing super fast weight loss and you're trying to only focus on getting the scale to go down, you may be focusing on the wrong thing. Definitely put too much effort into thinking about the number on the scale. Yes. So ask yourself, how can you maximize fat loss? Remember, the goal is to lose fat while maintaining as much muscle mass as possible, which if you're doing that properly, the scale shouldn't move drastically. It may still inch down, but it will not necessarily like drop drastically over and over and over again. And when it is doing that, then that means that you're losing precious muscle mass, which means that your metabolism is going down. So you have to remember that muscle equals metabolism. So that is a weight that you actually want to keep. And when you're in the very beginning of your journey, if you're optimizing fat loss and you're like starting to lift weights and you're not so focused on just losing weight really quickly, but on a lifestyle that's going to maintain the weight loss, then that means that you could sit for a year or more at the exact same weight but look completely different at the end of that year. And that's because you will be slowly losing fat and gaining muscle. And as that kind of goes back and forth, what's happening is because muscle has weight, the scale seems to just sit still, but your body composition is changing. You cannot underestimate those changes. A lot of times people will say like, oh, I'm only losing inches. Your clothing size is based on inches. The way that you look is based on your body fat percentage and how much muscle mass you have. And the rate at which you can lose fat is based on how much muscle mass you have. If you keep chipping away at that muscle mass, it's only going to get harder and harder and harder to lose not only the weight, but the fat. So you're gaining back fat every time you go through the huge drop in weight, and then it shoots back up and you gain back fat, but you've lost your muscle mass, which means that now you not only weigh more than you used to, but you also have more fat than you used to. And which if you have more fat and less muscle, that means even though you bounce maybe back up to the exact same weight that you were, your body now requires less calories to maintain at that weight than if you had just stayed there the whole time and never dieted. So it's very, very important to keep as much muscle mass as possible, because that's what's going to allow you to continue to eat a sufficient amount. Because the more muscle you lose, the harder it is for your body to just maintain itself, because that's what's going to keep the metabolism going. So ask yourself those three questions. Ask yourself, how can I keep the weight off? Ask yourself, what can I add to maximize my fat loss? Those are the things that are going to help you in your journey. Those are the questions that you should be asking instead of asking them in the negative way. And those will help you to actually focus on the changes that are going to matter and the changes that are going to help you to 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now still be seeing the results, instead of what most of us do is we look back on pictures from 1 year, 2 year, 3 years ago, and we're like, oh man, I wasn't even that bad back then, and maybe you were dieting then. So that's what happens, is that we keep dieting, but we keep looking worse a lot of the time. So if you flip your focus to those three things instead, then you will be well on your way.